Welcome to the Zealous Podcast. I'm your host, Rocky Snyder, and this week I have Jill Miller as my guest. She's the author of a few books like The Role Model and her more recent one, Body for Breath. She owns Tune Up Fitness with her husband, and she is really all about fascia, all about myofascial release. She's done workshops and continues to do them with Thomas Miller, with anatomy trains, and a whole bunch more. So we're going to jump right in, but before that, let's just remind you that this December 9th in Arizona, the state clinic for the NSCA is occurring. And I'll be presenting on functional anatomy and how to apply that to rehab strength conditioning, as well as at the end of January on the 27th and 25th, I will be offering a 2-day workshop where we dive into biomechanics in a closed chain environment, utilizing wedges, how to assess static and dynamic postures, and the strategies you want to have based on those findings. All right, on to the show. Jill, it has been way too long since we have been either face-to-face or talking, and I can't believe COVID has a way of just pushing things asunder and pushing things apart. So it's really great to have you reconnect here. And for the listening audience, Jill is, well, why don't you just give us a background of yourself and the books you've written, the projects you're doing, and all that.
Thanks, Rocky. Yeah, I remember having some correspondence with you during the pandemic and here and there, but it's been a while. It's definitely been a while. So I am the founder or co-founder of Tune Up Fitness Worldwide. It's a company that I run with my husband. And as a business owner of this company, underneath the umbrella of Tune Up Fitness, I've developed a number of different programs, one of which, my first was called Yoga Tune Up. The second one, the Role Model Method, which has a book, and the third, Body by Breath, which has a book that just came out in February. I specialize in educating people about the new science of fascia. I'm very involved in fascia research, and right now I'm working on a second edition of a medical textbook on fascia, a book called Fascia Function and Medical Applications, and I am reworking the self-myofascial release chapter. So the first edition went really well. The editors wanted a second edition, and so we're looking into what the latest science is over the past 3 years, and that's what I'm preoccupied with now, in addition to teaching full-time, traveling the world, raising 2 children, and my rescue mutt, and managing to, have a marriage and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, plenty of time for all that, of course, I'm curious, let's just delve right into the world of the medical world. Mm-hmm. What part of the medical world is interested in fascia? Who are you addressing? Who's your target audience when we're talking about fascia in the medical world?
Well, luckily, the objective of marketing that book is not my problem. My problem is marketing the book that I've written. I'm just a chapter contributor on fascia function and medical applications. So it's up to the editor, David Lazondak, as well as the publisher, Taylor and Francis, to manage that. But there's really interesting chapters in that book that cover everything from cancer. This is fascia and cancer, fascia and nutrition, fascia and scars, fascia and movement, fascia and sensory, the sensory system, fascia and self-myofascial release. So it's very topical. And so the clinicians that would pick, first of all, the clinicians aren't getting this in medical school. So it's just not there. And right. That's why when we encounter clinicians who've never didn't know where fascia science is at, it's because it just hasn't been included in medical school. Maybe if you're a physical therapist or an occupational therapist or a chiropractor, osteopath, certainly you will have some of this fascia science, but a general MD is not going to have a lot of special topics or special not know that fascia is of a special interest to them. And I would say, to me, the obvious group would be the orthopedists, and that would include everyone from a hand surgeon to trauma care. I mean, so there's so much, I think, to pay attention to regarding the tensional network. And I think the tensional network of fascia has been the most heavily promoted and easily received because it so directly translates into the physical training culture, right? Into fitness culture, into athletic culture. But there are so many other aspects of fascia that are important for people's health. And I think those are some of the really interesting those to me are some of the really interesting topics to dig into. But
Such as?
well, I think fascia and sensing is absolutely fascinating, because this is where we get to then communicate and cross-pollinate with the neuro community. The world of neuroscience has incredible ambassadors, as you know, and a figure like Dr. Andrew Huberman, who's been able to absolutely cut through the noise and make brain and brain science very interesting to general population. But when one of the quotes from A.T. Still, the founder of osteopathy, one of the things that he says, and I'm misquoting, but it's something like this: when you start to look at fascia, you are dealing with the branch offices of the brain. And there is some recent research that took a look at what is the sensory neuron load in fascial tissues. And originally there was a calculation that said it was about 100 million sensory nerve endings were in the fascial tissues, which is a lot. Like, that's a lot of nerve endings, because your eyes have about 120 million and your skin have about 200 million nerve endings. And so that was pretty cool. But then they recalculated it. They took into account another layer of fascial tissues known as the superficial fascia. So this original calculation was just done on the deep fascia. And this new calculation looked at more fascia.
Just under the skin surface, that interstitial tissue that would normally just burst when slicing into it, that was kind of recently, quote unquote, discovered in the last, say, 5 or 10 years. Is that what you're talking about?
I think it was recently. Yeah, we can get into that. Let me talk about so in essence, this membrane layer that lies in between two layers of fatty tissue. So underneath your skin, you have a thick layer of fatty tissue, and then you have this superficial fascia membrane, and then you have yet another deep adipose layer. So you have a superficial adipose layer, you have a deep adipose layer, and in between those fatty layers are this incredible membranous envelope, and it's variable throughout your body. It's not continuous, but sometimes it's interrupted, or it tapers off. But for the most part, we have this all over our body. So they recalculated, and they found 250 million sensory nerve endings live in your fascial tissues, which makes our fascia our greatest sense organ. And so as a person who specializes in self-myofascial release, this is really critical, because this explains so much of people's pain pressure threshold, and their tolerance for self-myofascial release, for different tools, for different applications. And so this is really able to extend my conversation in a lot of different directions.
I would love it if you could kind of break through some noise, as you say, to the benefits of myofascial release. Before we get into other things that we're just about to dive into, there's so many claims out there, some research-backed and justified, others, I think they're just marketing gimmicks that this is going to do that. What are your primary reasons for doing self-myofascial release?
Oh, well, there's so many. I could pull up a slide here. It'd probably be easy. Many will roll off my tongue, but if I pull up one of my, oh, look at that. I happen to have it right here, because I just taught the role model method training in Salt Lake City weekend before last. So these are the evidence-based benefits of self-myofascial release. I mean, it took a long time for us to get evidence in terms of but let me explain why. Palpation research, that is touch research, is a very new science in the annals of science, only 150 years old. So studying the influence of touch on the human body, amazing, right? But tool-based research, the first known paper came out in 1991. So we're in a 30-year cycle right now of people testing out variables of using tools on bodies and trying to figure out what it's doing, if it's doing anything. Are we looking at the right things? Do we have, so this is really interesting to me that it's a relatively new research area. But the things that it does is, number one, it improves movement coordination. When you roll, it improves your proprioception. So just using a tool, it does improve that body to brain and brain to body location system. It also improves joint range of motion. This is widely known that rolling will help with your mobility. Is it a permanent thing? No, it's a temporary thing. It's a transient thing. But if you do consistent rolling, you plus the training that you probably need to do if you're very restricted in a joint, if you start to roll and then train your joint appropriately, you're going to be able to, what I call, remodel yourself really well. Rolling also decreases pain. So that's great. It decreases a number of different types of pain. It decreases delayed onset of muscle soreness pain that might creep up after a workout. So rolling ahead of time is known to decrease delayed onset later, but it also decreases pain in the moment. And so it can act as an analgesic, especially if you wake up and you feel really crappy, your neck hurts, your shoulder hurts, your knee hurts. Rolling can starve the nociception, starve the pain receptors from being able to signal that output of discomfort. And so the rolling has this creates a wonderful window for training or for just getting on with your day. Rolling also increases torque. That is, areas that are rolled, the muscle contractions to that area are more forceful. They're stronger. So this is a way to actually increase your ability to PR or push or move weight or move yourself across whatever you're doing in your sport. Rolling also reduces arterial stiffness and improves your vascular endothelial function. There's a lot of really interesting research on the vascular system, and that friction of rolling actually releases nitric oxide. So it acts as a vasodilator. And this is just incredible stuff. It also increases physiological relaxation. So we get an increase in our parasympathetic tone with that. And of course, with that, you want to be calculating, like, how relaxed do I want to get before I need to perform? But it doesn't seem that this transient relaxation response really affects performance. But if you need to relax, if you need to get better sleep, if you need to deal with the hyperarousal that you're living with, long rolling coupled with breathing, this is what my book is about. This is what Body by Breath is all about. Long rolling coupled with a few other parasympathetic features can really make a massive difference in your whole body's physiological relaxation. It's also helpful for, rolling is helpful for lymphedema, helpful for local tissue inflammation. I see it as very helpful for people who are touch averse. We don't have a lot of research on that yet, but there are a lot of people out there, and the pandemic really showed me how many people were living in isolation prior to the pandemic. I mean, the blessing of the pandemic is my screen, my home was able to make its way into homes of people all over the world. And they were able to use self-massage to bring their bodies back to life, to be able to induce movement where movement wasn't before, and to just get touch into tissues that maybe had been neglected by touch altogether, right?
Yeah, I recall before the pandemic, you presenting at one event, bringing in the breath work into it, and utilizing the small inflatable balls that you have used for working on the viscera as well. So how do you bring in breath work into myofascial release without giving away all the secrets in your book, of course?
Yeah, there's so many secrets in my book. Like there's over 100 exercises and ways that teach you to compound. So I'll stop telling you all of the evidence base behind there's more, but we can stop there.
Okay. Okay. Well, that was a truckload. That was fantastic.
I'm telling you, like there are other mental health benefits, and these mental health benefits are starting to emerge. And this is what's really exciting to me, because it does take us directly into why I wrote Body by Breath. Body by Breath was written really as a response to originally when I wrote the book. When I wrote Role Model, I had done a call to action to my community. Do you have a story of how the role model work, how rolling on these therapy balls, these soft, squishy, pliable balls, have helped you in your life or with disease or stress management or whatever, or healing, please send us your story. Are you open to it being published? And every story, I was expecting stories like, oh yeah, it helped my elbow to heal, or yeah, it healed my low back pain, or oh, I didn't have to have knee surgery. Every story that people sent to me had stories like that, but they also had this unbelievable story of overcoming. They had these unbelievable emotional stories that coupled with their pain journey, coupled with their healing journey. And I really wanted to dig into the why of why these transformations happen. Also, what is it doing to the way we deal with life stressors? If people have a history of trauma, how these tools have become so multi-purpose, and the fact that they don't have chemical side effects or negative chemical side effects compared to a lot of other medication that many people must take in order to cope. All it has are these beneficial side effects. So I just listed 10 of them. There's more to be discussed. So I wrote Body by Breath in order to answer that aspect, really the mental health aspect of the work, because breathing, it doesn't exist just from your nose to lung. It's a body-wide experience, but your mental health doesn't live in your head, doesn't live in your mind. Mental health is a body-wide expression as well. And if these tools are helping with a body-wide expression of uplifting people from very difficult, suffering events or their own life, we need to know more about that. So that's really the impetus to write this book. And, so the title is Body by Breath, the Science and Practice of Physical and Emotional Resilience. There's a lot of words to subtitle the book, because breath is not the only tool that's used in the book. There's 4 tools. There's breath, there's breathe, roll, move, and non-sleep deep rest, also known as yoga nidra. So the combination of those 4 tools are the things that I use in the book in different combinations to help people to build their resilience and build a tolerance for being able to endure parasympathetic states.
Whoa, wait a minute. So repeat that. To endure parasympathetic states?
Yes.
Is it because we don't, it's uncomfortable to be in a parasympathetic state, or we choose to be highly sympathetic? I mean, what's that all about? Yes.
I think that I don't think we're necessarily choosing to be highly sympathetic. I think we're dealing with a lot of conditioning in an aspirational society, in a society that says succeed, succeed at all costs, go, 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 champion, champion, strive, strive, strive. And I think that there is definitely a weathering upon bodies that are conditioned in this way to go, 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 and to not, certainly, I mean, I'm a Gen Xer, like we didn't have these timeouts where your teachers taught you to breathe or have a mindful moment. I mean, my kids, they're 6 and 9, 7 and 9. Their teachers are so equipped to help them learn their emotional inner life in the context of school. Like that was never a part of our conditioning. And I hope that's going to work for them in their lifetime. But I think for a lot of I came to that work through the arts. Like in the arts, they asked you how you were feeling, express how you're feeling. And so I think that was a blessing in my life at a young age. But for the most part, people very much know how to go from 0 to 60, but it's much more difficult for them to go from 60 to 0 without crashing. And we know this because addiction is pervasive in our society. Anxiety and depression-related diseases are at an all-time high and predicted to keep rising. The long-term effects of the pandemic have obviously not helped any, but the number one issue of the National Institutes of Health is the opioid crisis. So people are in pain, and this sort of unfortunate addiction compulsion in our culture. I mean, the United States is the worst of all the countries. Why? I mean, I definitely am writing for a worldwide audience, but I live here and I'm saturated in strive culture. So,
Yeah.
so this is a way to start to build your resilience. And when people hear the word resilience, they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to really learn how to grit and grind. It's like, no, you're going to learn how to refill your tank, because resilience is built out of two things. It's built out of you being able to enlarge your ability to rest and recover. And that fills the tank so that you can perform or outperform what you've ever done before, because you cannot keep going without refilling the tank. Where you're headed is a breakdown, right? If you just go without refilling, you end up running out of fuel, sputtering out, breaking apart, and collapsing. So this is a way to titrate your body, people's bodies, to be able to tolerate the experience of physiological relaxation and stay present with it. A lot of people they start to relax. Two things can happen. They'll either pass out, so they'll bypass some of the stages of deep relaxation, not be able to stay present there. Or as they start to relax, this bizarre phenomenon happens for them, which is called relaxation-induced anxiety. Relaxation-induced anxiety, yeah, I know.
Wow.
Read my book, everybody. Just read the book. It's all in there. You're like, if you're not watching this, Rocky's brain, that definitely is that little like icon. What? Relaxation-induced anxiety. Yeah.
It's really, so here I'm thinking like very primitively, because I'm good at that, a caveman like, but I'm thinking sympathetic response, threat response, just all about survival, and just always just there. And we are of a culture like that. But to be more into the parasympathetic, that's vulnerability, that's exposure, that is rest and hope. There's nothing is going to attack me, which is a very hard place to go for a lot of people. And I could see how relaxation induced anxiety could come about, because the whole primitive brain is going, I don't know about this. I really don't know. Shouldn't we just be making sure there's no saber-toothed tigers around? Somebody's got to be on watch. I don't think we should go belly up. So you're saying breath work in concert with some self-myofascial release is a way to get in there that allows you to be okay with being there.
Yeah. So for some people, like what happens with relaxation and induced anxiety is that the body cannot tolerate stillness. The body cannot tolerate relaxation. And I think this is one of the reasons why meditation has such a high failure rate, and that it's not really easy. It's not really an easy sell. People who are really into it are like, you have got to meditate. Because I mean, I don't know if you meditate, but those folks are like, oh my gosh, meditation has been the key. But for many people, when they start to sit, and by the way, this is like most people. There's a little bit of research on relaxation-induced anxiety, not as much as I was hoping for, but there was this one paper that said that up to like 63% of people have relaxation-induced anxiety. When they go into stillness, what starts to happen is, of course, the monkey mind happens. Duh. Like everybody knows the monkey mind happens, but other things arise, like uncontrollable limb movement. And this is beyond like restless leg syndrome. This is like suddenly you're having these jerks. Your whole body gets shocked. Your sympathetic nervous system is like, not on my watch. I need to be on guard, just like you said.
Yeah.
Or pain. Pain will arise. Once stillness sets in, pains known or unknown will arise, and it's intolerable. Movement in and of itself, movement is an analgesic to pain. Like when you start to move it, because pain is a very, very slow moving, moves in very slow conducting nerve fibers. Movement goes in through fast conducting nerve fibers, so it can gate out that sense of pain. So for those people with relaxation-induced anxiety, the trick is to try to work with that anxiety first, to not shame that anxiety, to know that my anxiety body is welcome here as I'm learning to physiologically relax. And I might have some of these odd symptoms. And that doesn't mean that I'm a bad person. It doesn't mean that I can't relax. It just means I may need a different approach. And so a slow dynamic movement, a tolerable breathing threshold. And that's that's a whole other, that's several chapters of the book, but you finding a way that you can tolerate breathing. Palpation. The palpation with the tool, with the therapy balls, is extremely engaging to a brain that needs just a little bit of stimulation in order to not run away from this physiological relaxation. In fact, all the things I'm suggesting are in and of themselves things that create the relaxation response in the body. So this is a way of toggling, of titrating, of manipulating body, attention, breath in ways that finally can help a body to settle into calm at some point, eventually at some point.
Right on. Okay, so I don't think this is too much off the wall question, because the way in which we're talking right now may not be truly conventional, but we look at hand reflexology, foot reflexology, traditional Chinese medicine as it relates to the ear, let's say, and there are patterns that emerge. The top of that object, whether it be the fingertips, the toe tips, the tip of your ear, is generally up around the top of your head. And as you descend down that body part, it descends down your body. And typically regarding or relating to organs or organ function. But what if we transpose emotions onto that map? Mm-hmm. Is there an emotional map? I mean, I know there's some authors out there that say, well, when you have a hip problem, it means this in your life. When you have a shoulder problem, it means you're taking all the world's problems and carrying them on your shoulders and so on. But no, I really mean like the work that you're doing with self-myofascial release and emotional fitness, shall we say, or wellness, however you'd like to coin it. Have you noticed within the work with yourself and your clients, if there are areas of the body that pertain more toward one kind of base emotion, or is it just kind of a cornucopia and dependent upon the individual?
Yeah, I'd go with that cornucopia analogy. Yeah. I'm definitely not one to project, oh, the neck is going to be like very much about your this or that. Absolutely not, because you just really don't know where you have stories. Like, so I like to say the rolling reveals your range of motion and it reveals your range of emotion.
Cool.
And we're so dialed in, except that we blockaded our ability to have this vulnerable sensing, right? This very safe way of permitting and processing emotions. And I don't mean we, I mean like some people, like not everybody, because
sure, but just in general, culturally speaking. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, and for me, I have a couple of ways that I can, that I know are pretty surefire ways for me to be able to connect emotionally to myself. One is through this whole work that I'm talking about. And the other is through singing, through art, dancing or singing are the other ways that I have a chance to click into my own emotional inner life. And so, for some other people, it's sport, engaging in sport or watching sport. But I think each person in their own soma is going to have the relics, the fossils of their life story. And those things that we've had to shut down, shut away, punish, store, reserve, when they are permitted to finally emerge, it can be incredibly emotional. And it's really important. Like my husband says, like the more you keep that wave back, the wave's just gonna really crash in. You're just storing up wave after wave after wave behind that wall. So I do think it's an important emotional fitness element. And this can be done on one's own. This can obviously be done in community within a classroom setting, well facilitated by a teacher, facilitator, or therapist. And I do train educators of every ilk. The mental health pros that have been drawn to this work are astonishing me with what they're doing in one-on-one practice, because they're not licensed to touch, but they can encourage their clients to do self-touch while they're querying them, while they're allowing them to process what they've come in for therapy for. So I think there's a lot of potential, use for, again, going back to the mental health aspect of fitness that this engages with.
Certainly. And you have been bringing up breath for as long as I remember. I mean, if before it became haute couture, before it became really quite popular, you were in the forefront with that. And it's not just about the diaphragm. It's not about just the pelvic floor. And like you say, it's a whole body experience. So just guide me into a little bit of how you lead somebody into breathing.
Ooh, but I could talk about the diaphragm all day, Rocky.
I know.
It is my favorite
don't
skeletal
get you
muscle.
started, right?
Let's not diminish the diaphragm.
Oh man, no ma'am. I'm
such a
not
cool
trying to do
muscle.
that.
Oh my gosh. You're like, let's talk about everything but the diaphragm. Oh, shall we? So one of the things that I do in the book is I break down breathing into the zones of respiration. Now, this is a controversial thing to say. There's 3 zones of respiration. You don't have to believe me. But what happens when we do this fake division of these 3 zones of respiration is it helps us to understand what aspect of our autonomic nervous system is come online. So everything below the diaphragm, and that is, so I'm indicating just below my bra line here, I've got this diaphragm locked up deep within the rib cage. A subdiaphragmatic breath would be happening in what I call zone 1. And in zone 1, the gut expands, the waist expands, your low back expands, the pelvic floor expands. So there should be an allowance of the pressure of the diaphragm. When the inhale cycle happens, your diaphragm, boop, it descends, and everything below it distends outward. Now, you don't have to make this happen. You're not bearing down. You're not trying to have a poop. You're just allowing this reflexive action to happen in these layers. Now, a restorative recovery-based relaxed breath. This is happening during the nighttime, this type of deep relaxation breath. Now, if a body has scar tissue in their abdomen, or if they have unconscious tension in their abdomen because they want to look thin, they've overtoned their abs through abundant, core-based exercises or like 10,000 crunches a day type of thing, they might be lacking in a good elastic recoil in those tissues that respond to the diaphragm's pressure. And that person, that's pulling their stomach in all the time. They're a little bit jittery. They're a little bit amped because they're probably more a zone 2 breather. And a zone 2 breather is a breath that happens within the rib cage itself. And so when the ribs are collaborating with the diaphragm, you'll see this big sort of Popeye swell, the ribs balloon outward, and then they fall down and in. So we have this collaboration of the intercostals along with the diaphragm. And when we're breathing here, our heart rate's going to be higher. We're going to be a little bit more amplified, a little more energetic. And we need a sympathetic breath. We need a sympathetic breath like this when we're doing our exercise or fitness-based practices, because you don't want to have your abdomen all uncontracted, right? If you're going to lift 200 pounds off the ground, you better be bracing around your transversus abdominis and your obliques. So this zone 2 breath is necessary for heavy lifts, for amplification. But if somebody is living in a zone 2 breath all the time, chances are they're also defaulting frequently to zone 3. And a zone 3 breath happens in case of emergency. And these breaths are the ones, yes, where you're using muscles of the face, neck, and shoulders to raise your collarbones up and to get a quick draw of air, usually through your mouth, like a gasp reflex, a shock reflex, or sometimes in delight. So a zone 3 breath isn't always diabolical. Sometimes it's about, orgasm can happen in a zone 3 as well. But if somebody is, chronic asthma or prone to panic attacks, the zone 3 is these muscles of zone 3 are going to be so tonic. And what's that going to do? That's going to create headaches, jaw pain, neck pain, shoulder pain, hand pain, wrist pain. And they may have, bouts of asthma. So I was born to an asthmatic. And one of the reasons I'm so passionate about this work is my mother lives in chronic asthma. Both of my grandmothers died of COPD, emphysema at the time, complications due to poor breathing and diseased lungs. Why? Because they were smokers, and they never had a day of fitness in their life. So this is really the map that I use with my clients and my students to just help them to familiarize themselves, which zone is your home. And then we want to really try to adjust the tensions in zone 3 because we really don't need them that much. And then build up a collaboration of zone 1, zone 2, so that we can play our wind instrument as needed for the tasks that are needed.
Okay, I completely followed you on that. And I could think of a person that exemplified each of those zones. So yeah, very interesting. So is it just through practice of zone 1 or zone 2 bringing breathing to bring that person that is circling around zone 3 down into a deeper way of breathing, one that's not so sympathetic?
Yeah, but you have to address the tension tone. You have to address the muscle tone, and the fascial adaptations to that archetype, for lack of a better word, right? So a zone 3 breather really needs manipulation. And that's where palpating different mechanical rich areas of the body come in handy, knowing where what I call these portals of vagal regulation are. So there are different areas of the body where we can palpate or position or breathe in order to impact our main parasympathetic nerve, which is the vagus nerve. And so it's very, very helpful to adjust this chronic resting tone and then be able to use tools very skillfully to safely and over time let relaxation feel safe to these bodies. Because you can imagine these bodies are definitely relaxation resistant. They're going to be those relaxation induced anxiety type people. I know them well. They all come into my studio here. And I guess it's just I've just learned to work with them from early stages of life, because maybe I was raised by them. So I've had my fair share of experiencing panic attacks as well. It's part of my familial DNA.
And so when you're doing, let's just say, some myofascial release, self-myofascial release on the areas of, say, the levators, scalenes, or whatnot, up around the neck that are going to be much more tonic for those zone 3 breathers, is that what you're talking about, where you're blending breath work with self-myofascial release? Or are we going down into the diaphragm and pelvic floor where there isn't, it seems, as much stimulation? What's the approach that you typically take?
It's both and, because you need to give people the biofeedback of where their breathing is and where it isn't. And so that's one of the reasons why I use the Corgis ball. I think you were referring to this earlier, but this is a air-filled, pliable, grippy ball. And so this is placed on different aspects of the trunk, the abdomen, the low back, the waist. And it gives you a soft tissue reflection pool. So you're able to feel the excursion of the movement of your breath into the tool. And then the tool actually gives you something back. The tool helps escort your exhale out. And so there are lots of different exercises that we do that are peppered throughout Body by Breath to help people to facilitate those shifts for themselves. So the book is 480 pages. Part 1 of the book is all the science and why and how this works. And part 2 are those 4 tools: the breathe, roll, move, and non-sleep deep rest. Very detailed instructions. And then the book is full of QR codes also. If people are like, I'm not a book learner, well, there's a QR code that'll zip you out, and then you can listen to me direct you very specifically into a lot of the different experiences.
Yeah, you gotta love the QR codes.
Yeah, I mean, I wish we had been able to finish the app prior to the book publishing, but there's so much work to be done. But that's coming out soon.
Now, last year, I believe it was last year, but it could be more than that. But you were doing some workshops with Tom Myers, and
yes.
and so you and Tom have worked together. I mean, obviously,
yes.
Anatomy Trains, one of the forefront leaders in understanding interconnectivity tensegrity, if you will, fascial trains, and so on. But other people, aside from Tom, well, I guess let's just talk about you and Tom. How did that go?
Oh, it's great. Yeah, I'll be teaching with him again this summer. Tom is my bud. Like, yeah, we were in. Tom came in here during the pandemic, and we did an addendum to our Rolling Along the Anatomy Trains program. I had read Tom's book, I don't know, 20 something years ago, like when I was a baby or something. And so I knew I was familiar with his model. I hadn't studied his model though. I was more of a, how can I say it? I think I built my own PhD program in the world of meeting different anatomists, going to anatomy labs. I'm happy I got to cross paths with Gil Headley. I did a number of labs with him.
Nice.
Presented at the Fascia Congress before I even knew Tom. Somebody introduced me to him, and I was like, "Oh my God, that's Tom!" I was like, "Oh, he's not gonna like me." But anyway, long story short, they invited me out to present at their summer institute, I think about 7 years ago, and I taught 6 years ago, and I taught my body by breath immersion out there. And I stayed in Tom's farmhouse when I was there, and he came to every one of my classes when I taught that event. And usually doesn't do that. Usually they have a guest teacher. He'll come for the first hour and a half. Very nice to meet you, but he was there the whole time. And after the end of day one, he goes, "We need to do something together." And which is like, if the godfather of fascia says, "All right, you need to do something together," you say yes. And then you get to work. And we figured out this wonderful blend of our work. And it's called Rolling Along the Anatomy Trains. This is an online program that's on my website, tuneupfitness.com. And he teaches his impeccable fascial anatomy. And then I teach guided movement check-ins and rollouts all along. I think we did 5 of the cardinal trains in this program. It's over 8 hours, and there's testing, so you can get CEs and all of that. And then we did an addendum during the pandemic, and I'll be out there this summer, and we'll be teaching. I don't think we figured out exactly what we're teaching, but it's going to be awesome. So this will be, like our 7th year teaching together.
Ah, that's wonderful. Now, other names come in like Robert Schleip or Schleip. I can never pronounce the doctor's name. It is Schleip. And I think I've got his first DVD that is still in Germany, but it's still in German, that is. But there's also Bill Parisi now at Parisi Speed School, and Bill and the doctor work together. Of course, Bill is much more working with the athletes in regards to fascial research. What other colleagues are in the realm of fascial research that you would recommend some listeners checking out, aside obviously from yourself, Tom, and who I just mentioned?
Yeah, well, I think a great place to go is if you're new to the work of fascia in general. We have a really great beginner article on our website that's free about fascia and rolling, so you can always check that out. I recommend that people look at my friend David Lazondak's book, Fascia, What It Is and Why It Matters. I really think David has done the best job of making the history of fascia and fascia research read like a Rolling Stone magazine. I mean, it's so readable, and you will learn so much. So I think that's a really great piece of work for any trainer to get into. Then if you're like a super nerd, like I love cell science. I used to want to be a microbiologist, so I really love the cell science. And so Carla Stecco really fulfills that need for me. She has a book, which is I think it's called the Functional Atlas of Fascia. Not a cheap book. This is a major textbook, but the information in there is just, it's every paragraph you learn 90 things. So she's incredible. You can always just, type in Carla Stecco into Google, and also many of her papers will come up. And she has a very functional lab of research in Padua. So that's another really great place to go. I mean, there's so many resources. So Get the book Fascia Function and Medical Applications if you want to see the medical stuff, because I really like the pain stuff. Like, I love athletes, don't get me wrong, they're great, but I really love complicated things.
Yeah, you're a puzzle master. You like solving puzzles.
Most of the people that come into my space, into my classes, into my studio, they're either pre-surgery, they're post-surgery, surgeries didn't address this or that, or they have a legacy of scar tissue that's really making their life difficult. And so those are the kind of the researchers' work that I like to like hang out and marinate in. I could just keep naming researchers, but I'll stop.
No, but that's good. Let's spend the last few minutes here talking about the effects of scars on the body, because I found in my own work.
What about the diaphragm?
People,
are we not going to
just okay? We gave it some credit.
We did not talk about the diaphragm.
You gave it a little teaser. People are going to be like, oh, I want to learn more about the diaphragm. We got to check out Jill Miller, definitely online, and find out. Well, let's give it a little bit of both. Let's talk about scarring as it relates to the diaphragm. How about that? I've noticed that there have been many times where I have palpated or had a client self-palpate a scar in a certain direction that creates a nice response and provides them with a greater degree of range of motion in an area that was restricted. Now, okay, take that and run with it. However you'd like to fold in the diaphragm with it, I love it.
Okay, it's like an improvisational comedy assignment, like
exactly.
Diaphragm plus palpation plus scar and motion. Let's see if I can get it all in there.
Go. Yes.
Yeah. Well, going back to this conversation that we started with about sensory neurons and fascia, when we have a scar, we have an interruption of so many different layers of the body. You got the interruption of your skin, you got the interruption of the fatty layer, you got this blender of the superficial fascia all, chewed up, depending on how deep the wound is. Back up just a little bit. When we see a scar, what we're seeing is the very tip of the iceberg. Depending on what the wound or the injury or the surgery was, there's a scar path that is much more pervasive inside the body than what you're seeing on the surface of the skin.
Tree roots.
Not roots, gnarls, because the roots are organized. The scar is disorganized. It's gnarly. It's a clot. It's just willy-nilly patchwork that allowed for blood vessels to be able to regenerate there so that the area could heal. Tree roots is way too elegant when we're talking. It's not a correct comparison with the scar. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Okay, I do. It's gnarly. It's bulgy. It's not pleasant.
It's KNOT, pleasant. Very good. Well said, Rocky. I love it. It's not pleasant. Yes. So the challenge then is you have multi-directional vectors that the scar has disrupted in the flow of that tissue. The flow of that tissue isn't just the strata of the skin, the fat, the retinacular cutis, the superficial fascia, more retinacular cutis and the fat, deep fascia, muscle, more fascia, more muscle, down to periosteum or whatever. It's also disrupted the fluid flow in that entire area and creates dams, and the fluid has to bypass and swim around. Some still gets through, but we have often a lot of inflammation around a scar, and that is that damming of fluids in and around the scar. And all up in there, we have many different sensory neurons. And depending on the conduction of motion and the conduction of fluids, some of those sensory neurons are going to be extremely sensitized to the poor circulation in that area. For many people, when you touch a scar lightly, it like stings or it's numb. Both of those are a sensory response. That stinging feeling is that you've got inflammatory cytokines still just harbored in there. You also have just the basic cell turnover debris. So we have for lack of a better word, the poo and pee of cell turnover that's not easily getting washed away because of the disruption that the scar tissue, the scar fluid path has created. So when I palpate, when you push into, that immediately has changes some of the sensory neuron feedback, but also if I touch, and then if I move it just a little bit this way, or move it just a little bit that way, it can create an escape route for some of these fluids. It can also suddenly stimulate the nerves in a different direction, and they just start to give different feedback altogether. So there's just so many different things that are happening in a scar. But my advice to people who live with gnarly scars is to not let them go fallow, but to make sure that you do manipulations of both the scar and what you think is the scar path. If you've had a surgery, you may be able to get a very clear indication of what that scar path was. If it was an accident, a fall, a break, or, that didn't necessarily have, any kind of stitches or surgery, you'll have to make your best guesses.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Bring the diaphragm home now.
So thank you. Where the diaphragm will come in is we can use breathing to adjust our autonomic tone, especially when we're doing things that are unsavory or painful. When things are unsavory or painful, we're going to be in a more aroused state. We're going to be more on an alarm, vigilant state. But deep, slow breathing, especially rhythmic breathing that is slower than what your normal rate is, and especially breathing that emphasizes exhalation, that typically can adjust our whole body's autonomic tone, and that can soften unknown tensions and allow you for a more therapeutic involvement when you're dealing with your scars or any other part of your body that feels, painful.
So in regards to a cadence, rhythm of breathing, 2-second inhalation, no, what, 4-second exhalation?
You can name any time threshold as long as it's different from how you're normally breathing.
Okay, disrupt the pattern.
Disrupt the pattern. Typically slower. It's in there. There's a whole other, breath science question that we could get into, but I got to go get my kids to school. And so you probably don't, but I have to pick my kids up. But just know that changing your breath rhythm and sustaining that breath change for 2 to 5 minutes is going to have profound effect on your brain, on your body, on just the central tone that your body is used to. So change your breath, not fast-paced breathing. Fast-paced breathing does a whole other thing, but slow-paced breathing, slower than normal, make it bigger than normal, and be consistent with it. That will make a shift.
Beautiful. We'll bring you back on next spring. So when we'll give you plenty of time to talk about your summer workshop with Tom and all that. And I promise plenty of time to talk more about the diaphragm. But Jill, this has been fabulous. Thank you so much. I'll make sure that people get all the information, how to follow you, in the descriptions below the podcast. You've been a gem. I'm so glad we reconnected. Go get your kids. My gosh, you don't want to have anybody start neck breathing, waiting for mama to arrive. Oh gosh, no.
Thank you so much, Rocky. I appreciate you.
You got it.
So that's a wrap for this episode of the Zealous Podcast. Thank you, Jill, for coming on. If you want information on how to get any of her books, check the description below this podcast, as well as ways to sign up for her workshops and courses with Tom Myers, or just the ones that she teaches on her own. Until next week, be sure to tell a couple friends about Zealous. The fandom is growing like you would not believe, like at least one person a week. We can make that 2, maybe, with your help. Anyway, have a great week. We'll see you next time.